Herbert's 100 harem. It was clear the serpents were too busy with each other to care about them, even if they were large enough to casually spot. They ignore several different prey animals that scatter on their approach, and he's positive they've spotted the Lydris that's following his group at a distance. She's just big enough to catch the attention at the distance they're keeping. But they do nothing. The enormous, crab-like creature devouring the heat of the thermal core of the planet scuttles away safely. It's huge but harmless to the point that a few of the girls hang on to it and poke around it before moving on. His own interaction is minute. He swings by with every camera on recording to see the gigantic cross between a crustacean and an insect that might have actually crawled out of the magma below. It certainly looks dense enough for it. He then angles his fall past it to land in the impression in the wall and skid down it before leaping to the other side. This one was recently used, so there's even slicker stone inside it. The stone is so soft he's leaving a trail behind in it, and there's a mild crater as he leaps and leaves that trail in the wall. He races down as his wives scatter in all directions as the serpents double back to keep descending without leaving the general area. His eyebrow raises up to see that Isma is on the head of one of the snakes. He opens up the communication line. They can sense Axiom, meaning they can sense hostile intent as well. Herbert notes, "It's not a question, it's a statement of revelation." Yes, this is how the largest creatures sense the danger of us smaller ones. They cannot see us, they cannot hear us, and they could only smell us if we're in the nose. Hide your profile and do not let your intent leak into your weapon. She tells him, and he takes a breath and smooths out his own mind before moving with the Axiom. His jump takes him over the other serpent and he lands just behind the eye. The slight sizzling sound as the impurities from the wall that stuck to his boots burn and fry is a hell of a thing. He walks into the middle of its head, his emotions pushed down and away, but the Axiom still flows to keep him anchored within. Hiding himself from Axiom sensing and using the Axiom simultaneously is a lot of focus at once. Heavy on the focus. Is this today's lesson? Herbert sends into the link. It is. Isma answers easily. To use Axiom in large amounts while still staying hidden from the world in the Axiom sense. It's good you're on the other serpent. If the girls can get on the serpents, they pass my test. But I don't think too many of them will. You need to be ready in case the beasts start getting too hostile. Sounds good, Herbert replies. You hear that, ladies? Empty your minds and move. He is disheartened to find the first few girls can't even gauge the proper distance between themselves and the descending snakes. Most overshoot, several undershoot, and he tracks their positioning on his wrist computer. Thankfully, they get back to the walls of the canyon and begin ascending again. Take your time, girls. Isma and I are already in place to make the kills. This is all about skill today. He sends into the link. And where did you get these skills? One of them demands. Think, girl, you know what my job is. I've never confirmed anything directly, but the tacit agreements and lack of denial should have told you plenty about what I do when I'm on the job. He answers. I thought spy work was opening a line to communication networks and sorting through the data for your own use, she asks. That's one very small asset. There is so much more. Herbert confirms her suspicions but doesn't outright state what he does. They've spotted the body cover. They know that he's good at sneaking and is extremely mobile. Surely they've all put it together that he's a field agent infiltrator and assassin, right? Whether they have or haven't, he's come up close against operational security, and it's time to drop the subject. Anyways, we're here to learn girls, so just take your times. I don't care if you only jump once after watching for an hour or 100 times in that hour. So long as you figure it out, then it's a win. It's a solid half hour until some of the girls manage to land on a serpent. The gigantic beasts are proportionately slow compared to other snakes, but they're so massive that it only seems slow when considered on scale. They're moving fast enough that a few girls bounce and skid along the length of the burning hot beasts. The creatures are clearly sensing them, mostly with Axiom, as slowly more and more girls join them. Then things start going wrong. The serpent that Yzma is riding on suddenly twitches. It felt something, and it gets the attention of the serpent Herbert's on. He casually loads a glacier round in his caster gun, not thinking about anything but the mechanics of the motion. The serpents let out hissing sounds and seem to be outright communicating beyond basic instinct. Then Yzma's serpent leans close and its eye zooms down to see Herbert between his serpent's eyes. The giant burning eye is intimidating, yes, but he refuses to be frightened of the creature. Despite the eye easily being larger than most Vans, and the sheer heat and proximity sends up a few warnings in his suit, he does have to suppress his amusement as a cheeky wave from Yzma nearly gets him to crack. The situation is downright surreal and overwhelming, and he is making a point of not letting the Axiom touch his mind, so neither snake knows how much he wants to shoot. Then it pulls away. Whatever it was looking for, it's clearly found it or has dismissed him as a threat entirely. Either way, things are... His train of thought is cut off entirely when Yzma's serpent suddenly lashes out towards him, and its head is instantly reduced to hyper-chilled steel. He hits his own snake as it begins to react and then leaps for the canyon wall. He hadn't seen whatever set the creatures off, and he quickly regards his wrist computer to see a couple of girls are having trouble disembarking the falling chunks of formerly living metal. So he dives. "Spread out your limbs. Control your falls," he calls into the link. "I can't. The metal squeezed together when it cooled. My foot's trapped," is the response he gets. "I'm on the way," he calls out as streamlines himself further in the dive. He phases out partially, reducing his wind resistance, and then pulls on the sensation of gravity. He catches up to the falling surface. One girl is trapped. She not only had her feet on the snake when the metal contracted, but 3 hands as well. Another is breaking through the hyper-condensed, still Axiom-infused metal to try and free her. He lands on it harder than expected. He can't phase through this surface. So that's his first idea out the window. He races along and then puts his hand near her left leg. Her tail is trying to dig out her right. Okay, here's the scene. He channels Axiom into his hand to then cascade discordantly against the metal. There's a screeching, rending noise as the metal rips apart and her leg is freed. "I'll get the other side." He rushes there and repeats the process. Things are easier now that his little experiment worked. Furthermore, her Yaoya sister just freed one of her hands and she's bound by only 2 points now. Then a flurry of darkness descends and the metal is shattered around her. It's Yzma, and she has one thing to say. "Jump!" They do, and as their fingers or claws sink into the canyon walls, they start skidding downwards, leaving trenches in the slate and obsidian. There's an almighty crashing sound below and a rush of movement behind them. A section of one of the snakes just bounced up at them. Then it's swatted away by a black distortion that emanates from Yzma. It was the size of an aircraft carrier, and she just batted it away like a tennis ball. Herbert cues his communicator. "Sound off. Is anyone hurt?" To his immense relief, the worst that's reported back is strains and maybe some light bruising. Everyone's fine, everyone's alive, and as he glances down, he realizes he and the other 3 only came to a stop about 2 stories above the ledge that the serpent shattered on. "Well, that was exciting. Who's up for more?" he asks, only half joking. "Really?" Yzma asks him. "Really, I overcharged the cooling on this and all the excitement warmed me up. Let's do that again." "Let's not, please," the rescued Zedon says in an exhausted tone. "Oh, all right," Herbert remarks with a grin on his face. "Let's call that shuttle and..." Yzma's shaking head then makes him trail off and he looks towards her. They were clearly heading to a nest. "We need to check that they haven't already laid a batch of eggs," she says, and Herbert nods. "Sounds good." They were going further downwards and weaving back and forth across this area. So if it's anywhere, then it's here, he says, and there's some muttering around the comm network. If anyone has had their fill of excitement, climb upwards and stick around that area, he says, and there are a few relieved sounds. The rest of us will be back after a while. But if you want to call the shuttle early, feel free. Just have it stick around in the general area. There's a great deal of confirmation coming through things, and about half the group starts descending and the other half, including the two girls that had an impromptu ride via dead lava serpent. So, have you personally seen an eruption of lava serpents in the past? Herbert asks, as he and Yzma both lead small teams to scan the area. Twice. During the second time, I made a point of pressuring the governments into opening up population control and strict culling on these monsters. What did they destroy that you took that much offense? Herbert asks, and there's a growl. A small race, a very quick race to develop and very, very sweet. One of the smallest races had they survived. So very cute, so very understanding and eager to learn. The last of their kind died in my claws after I failed to save him. She spits out. Evolution is that fast with Axiom? Herbert asks in shock. The idea that millions of years of evolution can occur in mere centuries. It is, which is why hunting bureaus are so important. You never forget the self-loathing of learning that the animal you thought you were killing was actually a person, Yzma says. I'm sorry. I know that it won't really help, but I truly hope you've had the proper time to heal. I have. Thank you, though, Yzma says as she leads her group, more Zayden than Yaya further down. Good. If your enemy is in your own mind, then you have a foe nearly impossible to slay, Yzma finishes. Not exactly what I was going for, but same idea. There are many, many sayings the galaxy over about how important it is to not be drowning in guilt or filled with self-loathing. Yzma confirms. And yet, there will always be room for more. Life has a fun way of making people miserable. Herbert agrees. Oh? Are you turning pessimistic on me? Yzma asks. No, not at all. There's been nothing I've been unable to handle so far. And I just got into a slugging match with creatures whose weight class includes spaceships. I'm part of a hunt that's bouncing from wall to wall in a volcanic trench that stretches over a massive supercontinent. And tomorrow, we're going to leave so I can pick a fight with a creature that shatters bedrock with a punch in order to eat. When you put it like that, it sounds like you have a rather exciting life, Yzma says in an amused tone. Exciting? Nah. I'm just going to be fighting something that is usually tracked with seismographs. Incidentally, how do the Quake shrimp things taste? The Mar Yatha were nice and fatty, but not something I'd hunt down on the regular. That's something for you to figure out on your own. But I will tell you for free that Parado sea quakes have two potential bounties on them. One if they're too close to civilization, and the other is if you turn in the body to the high-end hotels in order for them to offer to the guests. Yzma tells him, oh, interesting. I wonder how many of them it would take to feed the whole family. Considering your appetite, 100. Yzma teases him. Hey, fair. Hey, is that a nest? Herbert asks, pointing to a hidden ledge carved into the wall with a large amount of obsidian chips. It is. Let's search for eggs before we give this hunt the all clear. It was clear.